Group Introduction and India's Civilization. What is India known for historically? What does Indian history reveal? What happened during the 200-year British rule? How did India gain independence? Group Post-independence growth. How has India progressed since independence? What status does India hold today in terms of governance? What are some strengths of modern India? What kind of infrastructure has India built after independence? Group Nation Building Challenges. What were the early years of independent India like? What were some key concerns during this time? What major event occurred alongside independence? What did the partition result in? Group Key responsibilities after independence. What were the immediate tasks for Indian leaders post-1947? What responsibility were Indian leaders also given? What did partition cause in terms of population movement? What caused many deaths during the migration? Group Refugee Crisis. What challenge did the sudden influx of people create? Where were the refugee camps set up? What was the main cause of the refugee crisis? How did the government respond to the refugee crisis? Group Refugee Rehabilitation. What pressure did India face after independence? What had Delhi become after partition? What was the first major challenge for the new government? What was formed to manage the refugee crisis? Group Steps for Rehabilitation. What were the responsibilities of the Ministry of Rehabilitation? What did the Cabinet Mission do? When did the Constituent Assembly begin its work? Who was the President of the Constituent Assembly? Group Drafting the Constitution. Who was appointed Chairman of the Drafting Committee? What did Jawaharlal Nehru do on 13 December 1946? What did the Objectives Resolution declare India would become? What rights were guaranteed by the Constitution? Group Adoption of the Constitution. When was the Constitution of India adopted? When did the Constitution come into effect? What is celebrated on 26 January every year? What are some key provisions of the Constitution? Group Government Structure. What form of governance does the Constitution provide? How are the government's powers divided? Who is the constitutional head of the state? Who heads the executive branch of government? Group Legislature and Judiciary. What are the two houses of the Indian Parliament? How are governments elected in India? What is the role of the judiciary in India? What courts make up the Indian judiciary? Group Need for a Constitution. What does the Constitution function like in a country? What example is given to explain the need for rules? Why would life be difficult without rules? What does the Constitution ensure in a diverse society? Group Diversity and Common Goals. How are different groups in school different from each other? What do individuals in different groups often have? How might each group feel about various matters? What is the common goal shared by all the groups? Group Principles and Rules. What is needed to achieve cooperation among group members? Why are fundamental principles important? What shape do these fundamental principles eventually take? What do these rules define in a larger body like a school? Group, trust and resolution. What do these basic rules help generate among members? What does this trust allow members to do? How can group problems be resolved according to the passage? What is the role of these rules in a broader sense? Group, constitution and society. What applies to society in the same way as to a school? What is a formal document that governs society called? What does the constitution serve as? Do almost all countries have a constitution today? Group, nature of society and government. What is the first purpose of the constitution? What is the second purpose of the constitution? What does the constitution specify about governance? What kind of political system does Saudi Arabia have? Group, democracy and safeguards. What kind of political system does India have? What risk exists in democratic systems with elected representatives? What problem can misuse of power lead to? How does the Constitution prevent misuse of power? Group, fundamental rights and the Constitution. Who are the fundamental rights in India applicable to? What do these rights aim to prevent in democratic societies? What does the right to equality guarantee? Why is the right to equality essential? Group, preventing tyranny and protecting citizens. What is another function of the Constitution besides granting rights? What forms of domination does the Constitution guard against? How does the Constitution safeguard citizens from misuse of power? What is the status of the Constitution of India in the legal system? Group, supreme law and democracy. Can any law in India go against the Constitution's basic structure? What does the Constitution protect citizens from? How does the Constitution support democracy in India? Who supervises the democratic elections in India? Group, global context of constitutions. Do most countries in the world have a written constitution? Which major country does not have a written constitution? Where does the UK derive its constitution from? What makes India's constitution different from that of the UK? Group, federalism and government levels. What is federalism? How is power shared in federalism? What are the levels of government in India? What is the Panchayati Raj system? Group, decentralization and quasi-federalism. Why is decentralization important? From where do both national and state governments derive their authority? In theory, how should powers be exercised between national and state governments? In practice, what is the actual relationship between the center and states in India? Group, quasi-federalism and power lists. Why is India not considered a true federal system? What term is used to describe India's federal nature? How is power divided in the Indian Constitution? Who can make laws on items in the Union list? Group, legislative powers and conflict resolution. Who can make laws on items in the state list? What is the concurrent list? Do states have autonomy on certain issues? Whose authority prevails in case of overlap or conflict in law making? Group, parliamentary form of government. What kind of government system has India adopted? Who can contest elections in India? What is the difference between the head of state and head of government in India? How is the head of state chosen in India? Group comparison and executive roles. How is the British monarchy different from India's presidency? Who heads the ruling government in India? Who assists the Prime Minister in governance? Who forms the executive branch of the Indian government? Group 3 organs of government. What are the 3 main organs of the Indian government? What is the role of the executive in India? What is the legislature made up of? What is the function of the legislature? Group judiciary and checks and balances. What does the judiciary include in India? What is the main function of the judiciary? Why are all 3 branches of government necessary? How is balance of power maintained among the organs? Group fundamental rights and their importance. Why were fundamental rights included in the Constitution? Who can enjoy fundamental rights? What can a citizen do if their fundamental rights are violated? What do the fundamental rights primarily protect individuals from? Group types of fundamental rights. What are some of the fundamental rights listed in the Constitution? What is the right to constitutional remedies? Who called the right to constitutional remedies the heart and soul of the Constitution? How does the right to constitutional remedies benefit citizens? Group directive principles of state policy. What are the directive principles of state policy? Are directive principles enforceable by courts? What is the purpose of directive principles? Who follows the directive principles? Group secularism and challenges. What is secularism in the Indian context? Does the Indian state promote any religion as a state religion? Why was drafting the Constitution a difficult task? What experience convinced Indian leaders to adopt democracy?